when ice became the road to a new world. Can you imagine a time when our whole Earth was frozen solid? Not once, but 5 different times in history, the planet became a land of endless snow and severe winter. These long and freezing periods are what we call the Ice Ages. Each ice age lasted not for years or decades, but for thousands upon thousands of years. The last ice age also continued for several thousand years, shaping human life completely. During this period, men and women lived in caves and only stepped out in groups to hunt for survival. But during this last ice age, something remarkable happened. An event that would quietly connect 2 worlds and later change human history forever. It began with a simple hunting trip. Now, let me take you to a group of hunters who unknowingly walked into history. About 20 to 25,000 years ago, a hunting party left Siberia in search of prey. They roamed through shrubs, climbed rocks, and passed by caves, moving carefully step by step. They slipped on the ice, regained their balance, and kept moving forward. What they did not realize was that the track they were walking on was no ordinary path. It was actually a temporary land passage that linked 2 continents together, a bridge of earth that appeared only because of the frozen seas. In the Ice Age, when water turned to ice, sea levels dropped sharply. This caused dunes, small islands, and narrow land channels to emerge from the ocean. The hunters had stepped onto one such hidden path. Carrying with them the genes of the old world, these hunters crossed the narrow land bridge. They entered the new world, and once they settled there, they stayed for good. They had no idea that they were writing a new chapter of human history. But about 11,000 years ago, the last ice age ended. The frozen seas melted, and the water level rose once again. That narrow, dry bridge sank back into the deep oceans, disappearing forever. This land route between the old world and the new world was gone. Today, we call that place the Bering Strait. At its narrowest point, the distance is only 85 kilometers. And yet, here is the astonishing truth. The man of the old world took 10,500 years to cover that tiny distance again. For thousands of years, both sides were cut off and lived in isolation. Now let's see what happened when those hunters built their own world. The hunting group that had crossed into the new world spread far and wide across the continent. They built villages, cities, and eventually great civilizations. Look at this old map of the New World, the American continent. In what is now Mexico, there once stood the powerful Aztec Empire. It spread over 200,000 square kilometers and included 500 states, where 6 million people lived. To the south of the Aztecs, the Maya civilization rose to fame. This civilization was already 4,000 years old at the time and became celebrated for its remarkable achievements in art and culture. Then came another empire, even larger, the mighty Inca Empire. It stretched from the country of Ecuador all the way to Chile and Argentina. Its population was about 12 million people. Besides these 3 great civilizations, there were many other settlements. On the islands of the West Indies lived the Arawak people. From Canada to Brazil and Argentina, Native American tribes lived in smaller villages. Most of these tribes grew their favorite food, maize or corn. They farmed it on a large scale, and maize became their lifeblood. These corn-loving New Worlders numbered in the millions. At the same time, there were around 5 million people living in the Old World. But despite the millions on both sides, neither knew the other even existed. For them, no other world existed, not in stories, not on maps, not even in memory. This was because the connection between the two worlds had been cut more than 11,000 years earlier, when the Ice Age ended. And so both worlds lived in complete ignorance of each other. Before the new world was even known, the old world was whispering strange stories. Stories that tell us some travelers from the old world may have reached the new world. Some even claimed they wrote about it. Chinese poetry written 1,700 years ago mentions a distant foreign land. In those verses, the land was called Fusang, which meant out of this world. The poet wrote that to the east of the East Sea were the shores of Fusang, and he said, "After landing there, if you travel another 5,000 kilometers east, you'll reach another sea, blue in color, vast and limitless." Could this Fusang have been America itself? It seems possible because the continental United States lies directly east of China. And after crossing it, yes, you really do reach another ocean, the Atlantic. The description matches in a curious way. Similarly, in the year 458, an Afghan Buddhist monk named Hui Shen set out from China. He traveled with 4 companions, sailing eastward into the unknown. He returned after living in a foreign land for 40 years. According to Chinese tradition, Hui Shen called that land Fusang as well. He even wrote a travelogue describing the conditions and life of the people there. Could it have been America? That remains a mystery. And then, about 500 years later, came the Vikings of Northern Europe. They too arrived in America, reaching the land we now call Newfoundland, Canada. There they settled, and the models of their settlements can still be seen today. Like the Chinese and the Vikings, some Muslims also claimed to have reached America. According to them, this happened during the time of the Umayyad ruler of Spain, Abdul Rahman III. They said they settled there, built mosques, and even preached Islam. And then came a moment, the fall of a city that shook the entire world. Some Muslims claimed they had reached America long before Columbus. They said they built mosques and preached Islam in the New World. Even Hindus claimed that their gods were worshipped by Native Americans. In their belief, a Hindu traveler from India once reached America, and because of him, some ancient American tribes began to worship the same gods. There are many such claims and many more stories like these. But in the end, it doesn't matter whether these claims were true or not. The real difference was not who accidentally reached there, but who truly understood that this was a new world and connected it to the old one. Because that real link was never made by Chinese poets, by the journeys of Buddhist monks, or by the adventures of Muslim or Hindu sailors. For thousands of years, the two worlds remained completely isolated. The people of the Old World believed the world ended on the shores of Europe and Africa, and the American tribes believed that beyond their seas there was only water and nothing more. Out of sight is out of mind. And this distance might have lasted thousands of years more, but then came the 15th century. The 15th century, a turning point. The 15th century, a century that changed everything. The balance of power shifted, and the entire globe began to transform. The people of the Old World, especially Europe, were forced to wake up. They had to step out of their comfort zones. They had to search for new routes, new lands, new chances of survival. But what caused this sudden change? The answer lies in the Muslim conquerors. Their victories redrew the map of the world. and their rise pushed Europe into a desperate new age. Now let's step back and see what the Old World looked like before everything changed. The Native Americans had left the Old World nearly 25,000 years ago. But what had happened to this Old World since then? Before the 15th century, Europe was still a dominant power. For hundreds of years, the mighty Roman Empire had been the world's superpower. It ruled vast parts of both Europe and Asia, but slowly the Roman Empire weakened. It shrank, and what remained was the Byzantine Empire. And in reality, this empire had collapsed into a single city, Constantinople. That city survived only on the memory of past glory and its strong walls. But in 1453, everything changed. The Turks struck the final blow to the last symbol of Rome. Under Sultan Muhammad al-Fateh, Mehmed the Conqueror, they captured Constantinople. The Roman Empire was gone forever, its name erased. The city's name was changed from Constantinople to Istanbul, and this single event shook Europe to its core. The power of Europe had ended in the 15th century, and now there was lamentation. Let's pause for a moment and look at this city that massacred to millions and vital to empires. Constantinople was not just any city. It was a fortress, a holy place, and a golden key to power. It was the center of Orthodox Christianity. The city had been founded by Constantine, the first Christian emperor of Rome. He even built the magnificent Hagia Sophia there. For Christians across Europe, Constantinople was sacred. But beyond faith, the city was also the lifeline of trade. It was the great bridge between Asia and Europe. Through it flowed Chinese silk, spices, precious stones, gold, silver, and countless treasures. When Constantinople fell to the Turks, this lifeline was cut. And with that closure, Europe was thrown into agony. What happened next shook Europe to its core. Hunger, chaos, and despair everywhere. The fall of Constantinople brought Europe two disasters, one economic, one spiritual. Economically, it was devastating. Joblessness rose sharply as trade routes were blocked. People became so poor, many did not even have food to eat. The hunger was so cruel that desperate parents abandoned their children in garbage heaps. Farmers, crushed by debts, began to commit suicide, while others lived like slaves under loans. The starving and resourceless turned to plundering. Crime soon spread like wildfire across Europe. Ordinary life became dangerous in every street. Pedestrians walked with their eyes fixed upward because criminals would throw stones from rooftops to crush their heads. After killing them, the thieves stripped the dead bodies of clothes and valuables. The rich could hire guards, but the ordinary poor were killed openly. Even government guards were powerless in this chaos. Europe was sinking into despair. And all of this came after Constantinople was lost, and the vital trade route to Asia was shut down. But then came an even bigger disaster, this time for their faith. The deeply religious Christians saw one land after another fall to Muslims. They began to believe their faith itself was shrinking. Europe, once the proud hub of Christianity, seemed to be vanishing. Christian lands were shrinking day by day, and the holy sites of their faith were slipping away. For them, the fall of Constantinople was not just a political loss. It felt like Christianity itself was dying. And that thought filled Europe with fear and desperation. And then came a sailor who claimed he could change Europe's destiny. Europe trembled with fear. Christians believed their faith itself might end. Day by day, their lands and power were shrinking. Merchants and priests began to dream of a new world. But where could they find it? They had no idea that just 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers west lay a vast continent. A land almost equal to the old world, rich with gold, silver, oil, and more. Instead, Europe kept looking east, to China and Japan. It all began with the travel tales of Marco Polo, stories that glittered with gold and wonder. Why China and Japan? Because of Marco Polo. His travelogue, written 150 years earlier, had spread like wildfire. He called China Cathay and Japan Cipango. About Japan, he wrote that palace roofs shone with gold, doors, windows, even floors plated with gold. He exaggerated the wealth of Kublai Khan's empire, almost like fantasy. But for starving Europeans, his words were a lifeline. Young men were convinced they had to reach Cathay and Cipango. There was only one problem. The routes were blocked. The land path was shut by the Turks, the sea passage through Egypt locked by the Mamluks, and across the Mediterranean, from Morocco to Egypt, Muslim powers ruled. European ships were attacked again and again. Europe was trapped, under siege. If nothing changed, it would starve. Europe was desperate, searching for a miracle route that could save it from ruin. Explorers tried. Bartolomeo Diaz found a way around Africa, but it was painfully long, taking endless months for just one trip. Europe was desperate. They needed a shortcut. They needed a miracle. And then, a little-known Italian sailor stepped forward. His name would echo in history: Christopher Columbus. Then came a sailor with a bold idea. Columbus declared the shortest way to Asia was not east, but west, across the Atlantic Ocean, with no Muslim powers to block the way. It was a shocking claim. Born in Genoa, Italy, Columbus had spent most of his life at sea. Like many others, he too was dazzled by Marco Polo's golden tales. He claimed he could navigate with the sun, moon, and stars. Educated people already knew the earth was round. Columbus believed the same. He calculated Japan was only 4,500 kilometers away, and beyond Japan lay China and all of Asia. To him, it was a hidden gold mine waiting to be claimed. But for Columbus, it wasn't just about riches. He gave his dream a holy mission. He called himself the Christ-bearer. In Christian legend, a man named Christopher carried Jesus across a river. Columbus imagined he would carry Christianity across the ocean. He dreamed of saving a drowning Europe, reviving a Christian empire as mighty as Rome. With gold in his eyes and faith in his heart, he sought sponsors. From Italy to Portugal, Portugal to England, he pitched his daring plan. But every king and queen rejected him. Europe was too poor, too fearful. Still, Columbus did not give up. And then Spain took the risk. In 1485, he arrived in Spain. For 7 years, he tried to meet Queen Isabella, but she was busy fighting the last battle against Muslims in Granada. Finally, in 1491, as Granada was about to fall, the Queen invited Columbus to her court. He promised her unimaginable wealth, gold from China and Japan to make Spain the richest kingdom on earth. And he promised something else. The people of those lands would be converted to Christianity. Spain could spread its empire and its faith across the world. Driven by greed and faith, Isabella agreed. She gave Columbus her blessing, money and ships. It was his first great success. But she did not know the truth. Behind the dream there was a deception. Columbus had lied. His calculations were dangerously false. The Atlantic was far wider than he claimed. The voyage dragged on. Theseus were cruel, and his crew began to lose hope. Fear turned into rage. Whispers of mutiny spread. Some even plotted to kill Columbus at sea. What promises did the Italian sailor make to his crew in his craze to reach Asia? Find out in the second episode of History of America soon.